Resourceful Designer, episode 43, a don't-do list for your graphic design business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He likes all types of music, but barely ever listens to any. Mark devote.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. If this is your first time tuning into the podcast, it's a show just like Wayne, my voiceover guy, said in the intro, where I help you streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to what you do best, which is designing. And I do that by sharing tips, tricks, resources, personal experiences, and stories from my career, which has spanned over 25 years in the business, almost 11 of which have been spent running my own graphic design business out of my home. So thank you for joining me. And if you're already familiar with the podcast, welcome back. Now, before I go any further, I just want to remind you that any and all links I mention in this episode can be found at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 43. Now, I didn't receive any new iTunes reviews this week, but I would love to get yours. If you're enjoying the podcast, please head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, which will redirect you to the Resourceful Designer page on your iTunes store, where you can click the ratings and review tabs and leave your own review. I always love hearing what people think of the podcast. Now, it's been a busy week for me. I've been working on a few websites, sent a proof of one to a client, and the emails I get back from him just amazing, outstanding, better than we ever expected. It's almost a little overwhelming. It's like a little over the top, the enthusiasm they have for the design. And it almost makes me feel like they're trying to play it up or something. I don't know. It's like I love getting good comments from a client, but this one is just a little almost over the top. So either there's something going on there, or they just really, really love what I'm doing. Hopefully it's the latter, but I have had a lot of fun working on their site. It's not done yet, but almost. Besides that, I added a few more projects to my to-do list from a few recurring clients. One of them wants a website revamp since their current site, which I designed about 4 or 5 years ago, is not mobile friendly. So they've decided, I've mentioned it to them a few times, and they finally came on board and said that now's the time for them to get a brand new mobile friendly website. And another client who is tired of their old business card design. They don't want the logo revamp. They just want a new look to their business card. So I'll be working on that as well, amongst all the other projects I have on the go. So it's a busy week, and it looks like next week will be just as busy. Now, like I do every week on the podcast, I want to share this week's resource with you. And this week, it's Deposit Photos. Deposit Photos is a great stock photo site. Not very expensive, and they've got a good selection of photos to choose from. But the reason I'm picking Deposit Photo this week is because they've recently come out with a reverse image search for their site. And I was playing around with it, and I must tell you, it does a really good job. If you're interested in Deposit Photos, you can check them out at resourcefuldesigner.com/deposit photos, all one word. But this reverse image search allows you to upload an image. Like, say your client comes to you and says, oh, I really like this image, or here's a photo I have, but you don't have the copyright, or you don't know where the photo came from, so you don't want to use it. You're a little reluctant, or maybe it has a copyright already on the photo. So you can take that photo, either the photo itself, and upload it to the site, or you can just take the URL where that photo is found and plug the URL into the search box on Deposit Photo, and you click the reverse image search, and it'll show you all the similar images on the site. Now, I was fooling around with it the other day, and it did a really good job. I just randomly searched through Google for some various images, and I did one. I just said country album, and I ended up grabbing a photo of a Dolly Parton album with her just sitting on a rock holding a guitar, and plugged that URL into it. And it did a great job of finding me a whole bunch of photos of people with a guitar in a very similar pose. I did the same thing with somebody sitting on a motorcycle, and I did another one where I found a beautiful photo of a woman walking through tall grass, but the photo actually had, I did a Google search to find it, but the photo actually had somebody's copyright right on the photo, so I threw that into Deposit Photos, and I found another stock image that was almost identical that I could have used. Now, I didn't need any of these for actual projects I'm working on. I was just fooling around with it, but I really, really like the way that it showed me images very similar to the one I uploaded. Because when you're searching through a stock photo site, yeah, you could put in your search terms. Like if I want a woman walking through high grass, I would say that. Type in, okay, I'm searching for a woman. I'm searching for tall grass, blue sky, and whatever. But if you do that search, and I tried it, you come up with all sorts of images of, well, of course, women walking through tall grass. But the composition and the angles and everything range all across the board. But with this reverse image search, yes, it gave me some differences, but I'd say the first couple of dozen photos were almost identical poses and layouts to the one that I had uploaded. So it did a really good job. So when a client comes to you and says, here's a photo I'd like to use, and maybe it's a photo of a famous person, and they say, I really like the way this shot was taken, but obviously you can't use that person, you could plug it in here and see what comes up, and it'll save you a lot of time searching. So even though I haven't used it for any project, it's something I'm definitely keeping on the front of my mind for the next time I have one of those photos that I need to find something very similar of. So if you want to check this out, see how it works, as I mentioned earlier, you can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/depositphotos. And yes, just for full disclosure, that is an affiliate link. If you do sign up for Deposit Photos through that link, I do get a very small commission from your signing up. So thank you in advance if you do decide to do that. Now, I mentioned earlier about the new projects I took on this week and added to my to-do list, but this week's topic is actually the opposite of that. It's a don't-do list for your graphic design business. As we work every day in our graphic design business, there are certain things, certain tasks that we do repetitively, sometimes even unconsciously, that eat away at some of the time that we should be spent working on client work. Because we know that time is a finite commodity. You can't get any back. Once time is gone, once you lose that time, you're never going to get it back. So we have to spend the most with the time that we do have. Now, I know that sounds philosophical, but it does really apply to your business. And a lot of those tasks that we do in our business are things that we really shouldn't be doing, or that we're just doing too much of. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of the 20-10 rule? It goes something like this. What would you do if you were given $20 million, but told you only had 10 years to live? What would you eliminate from your daily tasks or routines that would no longer be important in your life? It's a way of evaluating your priorities. So let's apply that to our graphic design business. What would you do if you were given a 40-hour project with a tight deadline on top of all your existing work, and you were told that you could only devote 3 hours per day to your business? What would you eliminate from your daily tasks and routines to make your business life easier? And that's what this topic is really about. It's looking at all those things that we do, that we spend needless time on, just because they've become habits or routines, or all the stuff that we do in order to please others that doesn't really benefit your business. If you really take the time to look at all these things you do and eliminate those that don't necessarily need to be there, you'd be amazed at how much more efficient your business can be. So that's where the don't do list comes in. So let me go over some of the stuff from this list. It's not a very long list, and the list, you have to customize it to yourself. And there are some stuff that I'm going to include on this list that doesn't apply to you, and there's probably going to be some stuff that you have that I wouldn't even have thought of. And if that's the case, I would love for you to leave a comment on the show notes page for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 43. And once I'm done the list, let me know. Do you agree? Are there other stuff that you think should be on the don't do list for your business? So I'll go over the list now. And of course, this is the list that I try to use. Now, sometimes I fail at it, but this is the list I try to use for my business, and you have to kind of tweak it for your own business. So item number 1 on the list is scheduling client meetings. Now, what I don't do is I don't schedule client meetings in the morning, whether that's in person, on phone, or via Skype. Anytime a client says they'd like to meet, I always make sure to schedule it in the afternoon. I want my mornings to be productive and to get to work. Not to mention that if it's going to be a Skype meeting, or even if I have to go out in person, most of the time I get up in the morning and I'm at my computer working before I've had my shower, sometimes before I've had breakfast. I'm definitely not dressed. So if I schedule something in the morning, that means I have to get up. I have to do all that stuff first thing in the morning, where I like to get up early. I watch a little bit of Sports Center to see what happened in the world of sports the previous night. And then I'll sit down on my computer and maybe work a little bit while I build up that hunger. I'm one of those people who can't eat early in the morning. I have to wait an hour or so after getting up. So I'll spend that time working. And then once I finally get hungry or I finish a job or something like that, then I'll go up, grab myself a bagel or some toast or maybe make some eggs. And then I'll hop in the shower, wash up, and then get dressed for the rest of the day. So when it comes to scheduling client meetings, I really don't want to do it in the morning. So I just make a habit that whenever a client says when would be a good time, I give them options, but they're always in the afternoon. So that's on my don't do list, is don't schedule meetings in the morning. Now, another thing, and this is just something I started doing recently, is don't look at your email until you've done at least an hour of work in the morning. Looking at your email is a huge time hog, especially if you get there in the morning, you first thing, you start looking through your email, you see some important stuff, you see some other junk stuff, you see some stuff that's doesn't really have anything to do with your business, but it catches your eye and maybe you'll click on a link or something funny pops up and it ends up eating away at your time and your productivity. So I've gotten in the habit recently. I used to leave my email program open all the time and I would get little notices when emails came in. I've gotten in the habit now that at the end of the day, I'll quit my email program. So when I get to the computer in the morning, my email is not on. There's no little flag on my icon telling me that there's X amount of emails waiting in my inbox for me. I just don't open it yet. And I'll sit down, and I've already known because the night before I kind of had an idea what I would work on in the morning, either continuing a project or starting a new project. So I just sit down and that's what I do. I either continue a project I was working on or start something new, and I spend about an hour or so before I decide to take a break, and then I will launch my email program, see everything that comes in and go through it. But then I also, whenever I'm done looking at the emails, I quit it again. I don't leave it open throughout the day. I'll quit it, and then sometime in the afternoon or when I get back from lunch, I'll open it up and see what new came in. This way, I'm not distracted throughout the day by the notices that pop up or little sounds and beeps from emails coming in that take me away from my work to go check to see what it was. So on my don't do list is don't look at your emails first thing in the morning until you've done at least an hour of work, and don't leave your email program running. Now, speaking of emails, number 3 is don't treat emails from people you don't know as if they're urgent. If you get an email from somebody and it's not an existing client or a contact or somebody that you're expecting something from, if it's an email from somebody that you don't know and they're asking you a question or they're asking for a quote, you don't have to jump right away and answer it. Email is a medium that allows you to take time. It's not like the phone where you get immediate response or sometimes even text message, which I never do with my clients. I don't want to get into that sort of thing. But when you get an email from somebody, especially from somebody you don't know, it's okay to let it sit. You don't have to treat it as urgent and drop everything else you're doing to answer it. Leave it there. And my habit is if I look at something and I say, okay, I don't need to take care of this right now, I'll go mark the email as unread so that later when I look at the email again or open my email program, I'll see that message again. And then I decide at that time whether or not I'll respond to it. And sometimes I don't respond to it till the following day. As I mentioned, email is not a medium that requires immediate attention. It's okay to respond to an email a day later. So don't treat emails from people you don't know as if they're urgent. Now, number 4 on my don't do list is right along the same lines as the emails and the rest. And that's don't answer the phone or text first thing in the morning. If my business phone rings, I'll often, first of all, I've got call display on it. So I'll look to see who it is. And if it's somebody I really need to talk to, I'll pick it up. But a lot of times in the morning, I'll just let it go to voicemail. I have time later on in the day to reply, just like the emails. If I see a phone call coming in and I don't think it's an urgent matter and I'm in the middle of working, I just won't pick up. Now, you might be saying, well, wow, you might be losing out on work if somebody's trying to get a hold of a designer and they need something rush. Well, I'm willing to take that chance. If I'm in the middle of designing something and I've got a good momentum going, I don't want to interrupt myself by picking up a phone call that I don't know if it's going to be important or not. If it is important, the person's going to leave a voicemail for me and I can get back to them later. They don't know that I was in the office and that I ignored them. And I suggest you do the same thing. Same thing with text messages on your phone if you do use them. I mentioned that I don't do text message with my clients, but it's all the same. I don't do it in the morning, maybe late morning, but first thing in the morning, I usually don't answer my phone unless I know it's something I'm working on. I'm waiting for a call or somebody special that I really want to talk to. I won't bother answering it. I'll just let it go to voicemail. Now, number 5, following right on the same path here, is social media. I talked about email. I talked about phone. Well, social media can be an even bigger sponge for your time, whether you're checking Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. Now, my social medias of choice are Facebook and Twitter. I do have a Pinterest and Instagram account for Resourceful Designer, but I don't use them very often. As far as checking them, same thing as my email. I don't check social media first thing in the morning, and I've turned notifications off on my computer. I used to get a little beep and a little notification window would open up on the side of the computer there, telling me when a new tweet came in or a new message from Facebook. Well, I turned off those notifications. I can go check Twitter later and see how many notifications are there. Same thing with Facebook. If there's a notification, I will see it when I go to Facebook later in the day. I don't need that notification distracting me, popping up on the computer. Now, a little trick I want to tell you is if you're like me, you get these notifications on your phone. And I mentioned not answering your phone. That includes your cell phone and not checking email on your cell phone. But sometimes these notifications pop up. And yes, you could turn off these notifications. But the other thing is at night, I have the do not disturb set on the phone. So I forget what time at night I have right up until I used to have it till 8 o'clock in the morning. After 8 o'clock in the morning, then my phone would not be on do not disturb anymore. But then a month or so ago, I decided to change that and I moved it to 10 o'clock in the morning. So before 10 o'clock, if I get any notifications, including phone calls on my phone, I am not notified. It's set to do not disturb until 10 o'clock. So that I gain 2 extra hours for my business where I don't have to worry about my cell phone beeping, buzzing, ringing, vibrating, or anything like that. Now, by setting it on do not disturb, there's certain people that I know, like my dad and my wife and my kids. They know that if they need to get a hold of me, if you call and there's no answer and you call back again within, I think it's 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, if you call back within that short window, you will get through. You can also add people to your favorites list. In that case, like my wife is on my favorites list. So if she tries calling, she will go through. My phone will ring for her, but it won't for anybody else. So that applies to everything I've talked about, whether it's phone calls, email, social media, all of that. So all of those things are on my don't do list. Don't check your email. Don't check social media. Don't answer your phone or text message. And I suppose because of the way those are, I could have actually put them all under one number instead of breaking them down. But I think they each merit their own point. Now, a few things to add to the don't do list that don't have to do with checking the various contact methods people have to get a hold of you. So number 6 on my list is if I decide to listen to music. Now, I'm not a big one to listen to music. I'm a big podcast guy. When I'm out working in the yard, driving, doing groceries, walking the dog, I'm always listening to podcasts. I rarely listen to music. But every once in a while, I'll get in the mood to just have some music playing. And I know a lot of people that just insist on having music. But if you're going to do music, I suggest you don't listen to music with words in it. Listen to instrumentals, listen to movie soundtracks, listen to classical music, listen to anything that doesn't have words, because believe it or not, listening to music that has words, even if it's just playing in the background, can affect your creativity, because as you're thinking, as you're contemplating, as you're developing things, hearing this speech in the background could be interfering with your creativity. There's been research that says that people that listen to instrumental music are less distracted than those listening to music with lyrics to them. So if you're going to listen to music, if you're one of those people that has to have music playing while you're working, set yourself a playlist or tune into a station that only plays instrumental or classical or whatever, anything that doesn't have lyrics to it. Now, I mentioned earlier that I don't have breakfast when I first get up. I usually wait an hour or so and eat around 10 a.m. or sometimes, I mean, if I'm on a roll, sometimes lunchtime rolls around and I realize I never had breakfast. But one thing that I try not to do in the morning, so I'll include that on this don't do list, is don't have a sugary breakfast in the morning. There are tons of cereals you can buy out there that are all sugar coated, as well as you can have a donut or a Danish or all sorts of stuff that has this sugar in it. Well, what's going to happen is this will only result in some sort of sugar crash later in the day. So you might have that sugary breakfast, you get down to work and you're doing great. Well, sometime later in the day, you're going to feel down, you're going to feel tired, you're not going to feel creative. So try to avoid that sugary breakfast first thing in the morning. So include that on your don't do list. Now, one that I'm going to include here is one that I fail at miserably, and this is don't turn the TV on in the morning. If you're working from home and as you get up and you go through your morning ritual and routine before sitting down to work, don't turn on the TV, because chances are something's going to catch your eye and you're going to watch it. If you're flipping through the channels, you're going to see something and you're going to end up starting work later, and that's going to eat into your time in the day. It might only be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but that adds up after a while. And I said, this is one I'm really bad at, because for years, the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I turn on SportsCenter. I record it in the middle of the night. SportsCenter runs on a loop overnight. So I record it at whatever, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and it's on my DVR. So when I get up in the morning, I turn on SportsCenter and I watch it. Now I fast forward through the sports that don't interest me and then just watch the ones that do interest me. And in case you're curious, I am Canadian, so hockey is my number one. So I usually watch all the hockey highlights, but stuff like basketball and football don't interest me as much. I will watch some of them just to be able to join conversations with some friends of mine that are into things, but I don't watch them really for everything that's happening. And sometimes it might just be specific teams. Like Wayne Henderson, the guy that does the voice intro for my podcast, he's actually a podcaster and a huge Green Bay Packers fan. And for those of you who don't know, Green Bay Packers are an American football team. In fact, the way Wayne says it, they're the X amount of times winners of whatever it is they win in football. Super Bowl champions or something like that. I don't know, Wayne could rhyme it off without a problem there. But he has a podcast called the Packers Fan Podcast. So because I'm friends with Wayne, when I'm watching SportsCenter in the morning, I'll watch anything that has to do with the Packers. I'll watch those highlights. But because of that, I have the TV on, and sometimes depending on how many highlights I watch and depending on what time I actually turned it on, it could eat into my day. I like to be sitting down on my computer at the latest at 9 a.m. earlier if I can, but there are times when there's just a lot of sports highlights, and by the time I'm done watching them, I look and it's like it's 10 after 9, a quarter after 9, and I've missed out on 10, 15 minutes of my day. And worst of all is when you go to turn off the program, delete it from the DVR, and then TV comes on and whatever's on, if something catches your eye, you can be in trouble and end up watching something. And that's happened to me in the past before. So even though this is one I don't follow, I really should. And that's don't turn the TV on in the morning, because it can be a big distraction and prevent you from getting to work. Now, number 9 on the don't do list is don't start your morning without knowing what you'll be working on. I make a point every night before going to bed, whether it's just taking a couple of minutes or maybe I already know. Every night before going to bed, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing first thing in the morning, what job either I'm going to be continuing or what job I'm going to be starting. And that way, as I'm sleeping, my mind can contemplate it and come up with ideas and direction that I'm going to take. But the other reason is I don't want to sit down first thing in the morning, get down at my computer, and then say, okay, what am I going to do now? And waste time trying to figure that out. If you already know what you're going to do, you sit down at the computer and you get productive right away. You don't waste any time. So if that time that you would waste trying to figure it out, do that the night before, either as you're getting ready for bed or as you're lying in bed waiting to sleep. Think through your mind, what is it I'm going to do first thing in the morning? And you'll end up saving a lot of time just struggling with what to do next. So don't start your morning without knowing what you'll be working on. And I thought I had 10 points to go over with you here, but one of them I already mentioned earlier. My 10th point was actually don't leave your email, your social media programs. Don't leave those things on throughout the day. Only open them periodically. Turn off all the email and social media notifications because they're just a distraction. And most of the time, they're not important. When you get a Facebook notification or a Twitter notification, they're not important. So you might as well turn those notifications off. And as I said, email, I've got in the habit now where I turn my email program on, or I'll open it up probably around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, look at everything, go through all the emails, delete what's not important, reply if I need to. If it's not that important, I'll just mark it as unread to reply later. And then I quit the program, and then I'll check it again after lunch, and then maybe I'll check it again around 4 o'clock, an hour or so before I leave, just in case there's something that I need to finish in the last hour before 5 o'clock whenever I get up and go get supper ready or whatever. And then sometimes in the evening, I'll come check it again. But I found that I've saved a lot of time on my business by doing that. Where I used to leave my email program open all the time, I would often get distracted whenever I'd hear the beep or see a little notification that an email came in, and I would go check it and it would take me away from my work. So that's something that I really suggest you do, is don't leave your email or your social media programs open and turn off all your notifications. So I had mentioned that earlier in the podcast. That was going to be my number 10. So those are the things I wanted to share with you. And again, that is my list of stuff currently that I have on my don't do list. Now, do I have a physical list? No, I don't actually have a list of stuff that I don't do. But these are the things that I'm subconsciously trying to keep track of in order to improve my productivity and streamline my business so that I can get more work done. Just like I said at the beginning, whenever I was talking about the whole 20-10 rule, if you were given a 40-hour project and told you only had 3 hours per day to devote to your business, there's a lot of stuff that you would have to eliminate. You wouldn't be checking social media. You wouldn't be checking email every few minutes. You wouldn't be answering every phone call that came in. You would be spending a lot of that time hunkered down and working on that project. So why not do it even though you don't have those restrictions? So once again, I'll just go over all the points that I said real quick here. Number 1 was don't schedule client meetings in the morning or maybe in the afternoon in your case. In my case, it's the mornings. Number 2, don't look at your email until you've done at least an hour of work. Number 3, don't treat emails from people you don't know as if they're urgent. They can wait. Number 4, don't answer your phone or text messages in the morning. Let them go to voicemail. Number 5, don't check your social media accounts on a regular basis. Number 6, don't listen to music with words because it could interfere with your creativity. Number 7 is don't have a sugary breakfast in the morning. Number 5, don't turn the TV on in the morning because something might catch your eye and distract you and make you late for work. And as I said, I'm really bad at this one. Number 9, don't start your morning without already knowing what you'll be working on. And number 10 is don't leave your email, social media programs on all day. Turn them off when you're not looking at them and then open them again later whenever the time comes. And turn off all email, social media notifications because they're just a distraction and they're rarely important. And you can try like I did and set your phone's do not disturb if you have it set for overnight. Just increase that from whatever time you had it in the morning, add an extra hour or 2 or 3 onto it so that your phone doesn't disturb you when you should be really concentrating on your work. So that's this week's topic. As I said, if you have an idea of something that you shouldn't be doing and you want to share it, please head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 43 and leave a comment there for others to see. Now, I'm happy to have another question of the week this week. And this one comes in from Norman. And I've had this one in my inbox for a little bit, so I'm sorry about that, Norman. And it's a little bit of a long question, so I'm going to kind of paraphrase what he says here and not read it word for word. He has a question about dealing with clients that refuse to pay or are extremely late in paying. He said he recently had a client that asked for a 3-page list of changes to their website. And he thought there'd be no issue because it was a client that he's had no problems with before. But all the change turned into an 11+ hour job, which was the biggest bill he had ever sent her. And once she received the bill, she was giving him the runaround about paying. She had said that she had already mailed the check. So what Norman did is he went ahead and uploaded all the changes to the site on good faith, but the check never came in. And then he kept contacting her and she was saying, oh, there's something must have happened. I'll send another check. And when that didn't come in, then he sent a PayPal invoice and she said, I'll pay you within 30 minutes. And he never received payment. And it just went on and on and on where she was saying, yeah, I'm sending payment or I'm going to pay you. And the payments never came. Now, Norman says in his email that he did threaten to take down the site or to at least remove the changes that he had made to it until payment came in. And when payment didn't arrive, he actually did that. He removed all the updates to the site. So he's asking if, first of all, if he did the right thing and if he should have approached it differently. Now, this is a situation most of us that have been in business for several years, or for any amount of time for that matter, have probably experienced something like this, where the client says, yeah, I've paid you, or the check's in the mail, which is one of the oldest lies there is, and it just doesn't come through. Now, first off, it's hard to really say whether or not it was the right thing to do because I don't know the specific situation, Norman, with that client. And sometimes it's not that the client's being bad or inconsiderate. There could always be a real problem at the other end. I know when I first started my own business, there was one client I was doing work for, and this happened. He actually gave me a check, but he post-dated, and he says, do you mind if I post-date the check? And I says, okay, why not? So he post-dated the check. And then when it came time, I think the day before the check was coming due, he called me up and he says, do you mind holding on to that check for another week? And what was I going to say? So he says, don't do anything until the following Friday. So I waited. And when the following Friday came in, he called me to apologize. And he says, you better not cash that check. I declared bankruptcy. Now, I didn't know this at the time. Like, he was going through all this trouble and Yes, I was upset. I lost some money. It wasn't a big amount. I think it was only like $200 or $300. But for somebody that was just starting off, that was significant. But thinking back, it wasn't. But I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. I thought under good faith, I was doing work for him. I had a check in hand, even though I couldn't cash it. But then when it finally came time, I was never able to cash that check. In fact, years later, I still have that check sitting in my drawer here. And he declared bankruptcy. So that situation taught me early on that, and I didn't go after him like you did, Norman, and threaten anything or that at that point because I had a check in hand. But it made me realize that anything I would have said to him, it would have just rolled off deaf ears because he was in a much worse situation than I ever imagined. So to me saying, I want my money and what's going on, like when can I cash this check? It would have probably created a little more stress in his life, but he was already under a lot of stress that I didn't even know was happening. And even though it frustrated me, I'm sure it frustrated him to no end. So what I'm getting at here, Norman, is before we get into the whole thing about collecting and them not paying, just keep in mind, before you start getting angry, and I'm not saying you did, Norman, I'm just saying in general, before you start getting angry and start threatening people about payments, keep in mind that there could be a valid reason why they're not paying their bills or why they're late or that. And they might not be willing to tell you. I mean, declaring bankruptcy is a big thing. And it's not something you go bragging about saying, oh, by the way, I'm not paying the bill because, I'm in the middle of filing for bankruptcy. It's something that people probably won't share with. Now, that's not every situation. But as I said, my point is just keep in mind that there might be a very good reason why they're not paying you. Now, with that said, there are some clients that just for some reason don't want to pay. And I talked about that back in episode 21, where I talked about ending relationships with a client. There was a client I had that was a problem. I kept going after the money, and he started paying me in installments because he didn't have the money. And I told him I wouldn't do any work for him until he was completely paid up. And it took him forever. And me keep going after him. And he would say, can I pay you by PayPal? Yes, here's the amount. Here's where you send it. And then he wouldn't pay. Then again, like a couple of weeks later, is it okay if I pay you by PayPal? It's like, I already answered you that. And anyways, in the long run, when he finally paid off his bill, and he eventually paid off the entire bill, I told him afterwards that I couldn't work with him anymore because of that. And he understood, and that's it. We parted ways. So all sorts of things happen. But keep in mind, there are ways to try to prevent this. For one, have a contract in place. You have a contract explaining all the details up front and what is owed to you when stuff is owed, then at least you have yourself covered. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have a contract, people are going to be paying. Somebody cannot pay you just as easily if with a contract in place as without. But having a contract does help you out a lot. Now, the other thing to do is ask for payment before anything is handed over. I know you said that, Norman, that you uploaded all the updates because she said the check was in the mail. But if somebody's going to send you a check and they're going to mail it to you, then tell them that's fine. Okay, I'm going to hold on to it until I receive the money. Until the money is in my account, I'm not going to do anything. And if they want to get it done faster, then they can pay you through credit card. And if you don't accept credit cards, there's always PayPal. It's really easy to set up a PayPal account and they can pay you that way. There's always ways they can get you the money. And with websites, it's really easy. You just hold on to it and say, okay, I've got the changes done. I'm not going to upload them until I actually have the money, and you hold on to them. Now, if you want to do this, just quickly, the easiest way to do this, and this is the way I do things, is whenever a client asks me to make updates or changes to their website, I don't make the updates or changes to their live website. What I do is I copy their website to a staging domain that I have, and then I make all the changes there, show them to the client. Once the client approves all the changes, once the client pays me, then I will transfer all those changes to the live website. How I do that is I use a program called Backup Buddy, which is great for backing up the website. I use it on all my clients' websites. I have Backup Buddy running. And if you're curious about that, resourcefuldesigner.com/backup buddy. And it backs up all the websites on a regular basis. But the great thing about it is it allows you to migrate a website from one domain to another. So if a client hires me to do some changes for their website, unless it's just, can you fix a spelling mistake here or there? But if they want changes that are going to really affect the site, then I will copy their website or migrate their website to another domain that I own, set it up there, work on their site there, give that link or that URL to the client, say, okay, go look at it. Do you like these changes? And then once they pay me and I actually have the money in hand, then I can use Backup Buddy again to then transfer the site back to their proper domain. So that's a great way for me to make changes, make sure I get paid, and then the client gets the updates that they want. Now, clients are going to try to do all sorts of stuff. They're going to try to give you excuses saying, yeah, like you said, the check's in the mail, or I can't pay you till Friday or that, but could you do the updates? Well, you've got to hold firm. And if you have a contract in place that says that you do not upload or they don't get the final piece until the payment has been received, then you just say, no, thank you, but no thanks. According to the contract, I can't do that until we receive payment. So then it's up to the client. If they want to send the thing in the mail, that means they're willing to wait while the post office delivers you the check, and then you have to go deposit the check in your bank. Because just receiving the check in hand does not necessarily mean payment has been made. Go deposit the check in your bank. Yeah, now, there's always the issue with a check bouncing, so you deposit in your bank and then later find out that there was no funds, so it bounces. But that's something we're not going to get into here. Now, when it comes to physical products, it's the same thing. I'll order stuff, like say if I'm ordering business cards or I'm getting flyers or whatever printed material, it's the same thing. I drop off the material, but I require payment. So when I physically drop off the product to my client, they have to hand me a check at that point. If they don't have a check ready, I don't hand over the goods. So I don't know if this really helped you, Norman. In your situation, I probably would have done the same thing. Since the updates were already done and you weren't receiving payments, I would have taken the website down too, or not the website, but just those changes, I would have taken them down. But just keep in mind, whenever you threaten a client like that, or you do follow through and do something like this, as I said earlier, you don't know the situation behind the scenes, what's going on. Maybe your client is not thinking about their business right now. Something happened. Their child's in the hospital. Somebody in their family died. They're going through a divorce. And so paying you is probably the farthest thing from their mind. And you also got to keep in mind, if you do use the strong arm tactics, you could possibly lose this client because they're going to say, well, I don't want to deal with this person again. Look what they did. And they're going to take their business elsewhere. So you got to weigh that on whether or not this is worth sticking through. And I've had clients that they were really good at, and they, instead of me going after the money, they came to me and said, listen, I'm going to pay you, but I need some extra time. And if they come to me and they're polite and they explain the situation, then I'll gladly give them the extra time with no interest or anything charged, or I'll offer them payment options. And if that's the case, as long as they follow through with things, everything will be great. But always give the client the benefit of the doubt, because if not, you could possibly lose the client. So I don't know if that helped you at all, Norman, if I answered your question. You don't say in your email at the time you were still going through this, so I don't know if you ever did get payment from the client. I can tell you that I had one client, a website that I built, and we had a contract in place and everything. And it went on, and he kept saying, yeah, I'm sending you the money. And he never did. And I kept going after him. And I did the same thing you did. I threatened. I says, if I don't receive payment, I'm going to take the website down, because I had built the entire website. And you know what happened? A couple of weeks later, I saw something. I forget if it was online or in a flyer or whatever. I saw something for that same company, but with a different domain name. And he had actually gone and purchased another domain name and had somebody else design a website for him. And that's the website he was now advertising. So the one that I had built that I threatened to take down, he didn't care about anymore. He wasn't using that domain. Now, he had that domain for years, but he was willing, instead of paying, and it wasn't a big bill. I think it was $400 or something for what I had done. It wasn't a big website, obviously. But whatever it was I had done, instead of paying that $400, he was willing to let that domain that he had for years go and start a brand new website with a new domain that probably some nephew or kid or somebody, one of his clients, because he dealt with a lot of teenagers, one of them probably built it for him. So that was another lesson I learned the hard way. I never got that payment, and that's one of the very few payments that I never collected in my business. So anyways, thank you for that, Norman. And if you would like to submit your question for the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback, and you could leave your question there, and I will try to answer it in a future episode of the podcast. But that brings us to an end here. Before I go, I want to remind you of my resource of the week, which is deposit photos, which you can get to at resourcefuldesigner.com/deposit photos, and test out their new reverse image search, which is really cool. I really like it. Now, in next episode of the podcast, I'll be talking about how it's okay to ask for help in your business. Until then, I am Mark Decote, and I wish you all the best in your graphic design business. And as always, remind you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.